In this video, we're going to be taking a look at a standing hip extension PAILs rails. I love this position in particular for working on hip extension because it does closely mimic a position that we're definitely going to get into during our running posture. We would see at a point where we would go down to the ground and we would make ground contact, you're going to find yourself in a high degree of hip extension as you sort of kick back, but then there's also an element of close to full knee extension, and this is what we'll be in when we set up for this position, okay? Not the most difficult thing to get into. We can almost straight away understand how this position will work. The one thing that we have to be aware of is our pelvis position. So something that I've gone through before, this idea between what would be considered like an anterior and a posterior tilt. The easiest way to get into this sort of posterior tilt is to focus on thinking of your belt buckle coming towards your face. You're going to find it's a lot easier to kind of keep your abs down. And you're going to find it's a lot easier to make tension with the back of your hip, your glute, okay? You can stand close to a frame of some sort that you can grab onto. This is really going to help for the irradiation process, and it's just going to help you get an understanding of where you should be holding the tension as opposed to standing and getting fatigued for the 5-minute PAILs rails effort that we're about to go through, okay? We're going to set the timer because a lot of us are going to be able to find this position straight away. Just basically set your feet a little bit further apart. Keep your foot planted. Try to think of that belt buckle position, and then very slowly, keeping that slight bend in the knee, just try to think of orienting the body forward, and you're going to get a nice stretch up and really focus on the front of the hip, okay? Let's set the timer from here and then go through some of the changes that we can make. So it's important to be aware that there are a few areas that we can adjust from. For the majority of us, this is going to be a tough enough stretch already, and there's probably not going to be a lot that we actually need to focus on in terms of changing. But for some of us, it might be a case where we're just trying to find the best line of tension for us, and we can try to slowly play around potentially with the orientation of the pelvis. You can see from here, if I sort of turn slightly, I'm going to potentially be putting more of a stretch into what would be the lateral fibers of the hip, or if I position myself where I've got more sort of an open hip out to the side, similar sort of position again, where I might just sort of play around then with, as we've said there, sort of the opening and closing of the hips, but then I can also potentially push my hip out to the side as well. And once again, just putting more of a stretch on sort of the lateral fibers if that's necessary for us. It's all about finding the best line of tension. That then will change where we actually end up sort of pushing and in what direction. We want to go with the direction that we're sort of leaning towards. So if we've got more of a straight forward, if we think of the clock face, we think of 12 o'clock. If we've got more of a position towards 12 o'clock, that's ideal. If we've got more of a position out towards 1 o'clock, that's where we're actually going to be driving from when it comes to the foot. We can also then play around with the degree of external or internal rotation at the femur. So we've adjusted the pelvis relative to the femur just there. Now we're focusing on adjusting the femur relative to the pelvis. So we could have just basically a straightforward position with the pelvis, but we could potentially try to turn the foot inward into internal rotation, or focus on turning more outward into external rotation. All about finding the best line of tension for you, so be aware of those few adjustments that you can make. When you're ready though, when it comes to the PAILs effort, we wanna make sure that the drive is coming from the hip. So I want you to imagine that you're gonna drive through the floor, and you're gonna drive the leg straight up. It's not gonna be a kick type motion with the knee or anything like that. It's gonna be a straight drive with the leg. So keep that stiffness running throughout the entire system as you drive and flex from the hip. Take a big breath in, pack it into your lower abdomen very slowly. I want you to start driving and sort of dragging the leg forward. So you're keeping that contact, nothing is moving, and you're feeling everything light up on the front of the hip. Remember, you've got tension in the arm, you've got tension in the torso. Everything is aiding and assisting you to really feel the movement coming from the right area. As time goes on, you're going to feel a level of increase in the level of tension. You're adding about 10% every second up to your greatest, safest max effort for today. We're going to go for our rails contraction. Very slowly, I want you to transfer into the opposite direction. I want you to imagine that you're trying to drive your heel back behind you. Squeeze your bum, keep tension in the front of the abs, and imagine that you're trying to actually sort of push the body forward as you kick back behind you with the hip. We can get to that high level of effort much quicker on our rails effort, just remember that. So straight up to 100 with your effort. Now take a big breath in, let it go, relaxing. That's about our 20-second rails effort. Focus on your breath for the time being, really trying to imagine that all of the tension in the body is just slowly dissipating. You're letting everything relax and release. Big inhale through the nose, long exhale through the mouth. From here, it's all about little micro shifts and adjustments. So if you want to find like a better line of tension, potentially move about. Remember, you've got the position of the femur relative to the pelvis. That's more going to be adjusting the foot position. And then you've got your pelvis relative to your femur. Plenty of ways that we can adjust and just find that best suitable line of tension for us. When it comes to our next PAILs effort, let's get there much quicker. Let's add about 10% or 20%, 15, 20% every second. Very slowly, let's start to drive. Remember that idea of kicking straight up with the hip flexor and that straight leg. Start to drive into the ground. Really feel everything that was just getting a stretch now light up for that isometric contraction. You're even potentially pulling with the lead leg a little bit, driving and sort of thinking of that counter movement of the two coming close together. And that's really going to help you drive and create a lot of tension in the front of the hip. Keep increasing, keep increasing. Tension in the opposite way. Now try to squeeze your bum, push back behind you. Imagine that you're trying to bring the entire torso forward as you squeeze and drive back with your bum. Make sure nothing is coming from the lower back. It's all coming from your glute. Your hip is the one extending. It's not your lower back. Keep squeezing your bum, keep squeezing your bum. Almost there. 3, 2, 1. Let that tension go. Just try to dissipate and relax. Hold the position, don't come out of it. Just try to release all of that tension at the front of the hip, at the back, at the side, turning everything to jello. Really put your conscious effort into the area. Make sure that you're trying to let it relax. You're putting just as much emphasis on the relaxation as you were the contractions that you just created. Important to have both abilities. Ability to create tension with the muscle and get it stronger, but then also the ability to sort of relax and reduce the tone of it as well. Focus on that breath, long exhales. Letting everything relax. And you should feel just naturally you're able to achieve sort of a better position than when you started. Relaxing. And that's us done. You can see, very easy to just come out of this position and stand up. You're obviously going to do the opposite side and follow along again, but really, really easy position to get into and so many little adjustments that we can make. As we've said, it's not just about sort of attacking what would be the front of the hip from this standing position. We can potentially go out a little bit wider, try to think of getting in more in towards what would be the adductor, or we could potentially move out to the side a little bit and get more into the side, that lateral part of the hip, and really get sort of a full 360-degree look at the hip in terms of its capabilities, because you can see there is a lot of movement within hip flexion. It's just not about sort of that basic linear path up into hip flexion. We can come across an adduct and we come wide and abduct as well, okay? So bear that in mind as you're setting up for the position. Tiny little adjustments to make and finding the best line of tension that's suitable for you, okay? Any questions, be sure to leave them in the comment section below and I'd be happy to get back to you. If we're working together and I've assigned this movement and you've got some questions, just reach out to me directly and I'll get back to you as well. If you think someone is gonna enjoy this video or find it very useful, then be sure to share it with them, like the video as well. And if you wanna see more videos like this in the future, be sure to follow the page. All right, see you soon, folks.